Maximum Fried was just what the Braves needed, and they took Saturday's game 2, 3-0 to tie up the NLDS with the Brewers at 1 win apiece. You're watching Battery Power. I'm Cory McCartney, joined by Grant McAuley. And Grant, we said this wasn't an elimination game, but it felt absolutely must win. The Braves rode Fried in just enough offensive moments to leave Milwaukee with a much-needed split.
Yeah, hey, look, this was must win. I mean, it wasn't elimination, like you just said, but you were going to be happy, I think, if you went up to Milwaukee, faced the kind of starting pitchers that you were facing in this series, and were able to leave having split it. And now you can turn it into a best 2 out of 3. That's the good thing about it. And this is what I was talking about after the disappointment of game 1. Don't think about what's going to be happening in game 3, 4, 5. You just got to win game 2, bring it home and figure it out. But Max Fried was dynamic. I think everybody expected that he was going to answer the bell. He was going to be ready to give the Braves everything we've seen for the past couple of months and honestly the past couple of years, as he has really leveled up his game and become one of the Braves' most dependable starting pitchers in recent memory. So a huge postseason moment for Max Fried, or performance for Max Fried, to go on his resume, and exactly what his team needed was a strong start. But they also needed to get the offense going, and that also happened in game 2. So a lot of things to like about it, even if it wasn't the most perfect game, and even if your nerves felt a little bit stressed out by the time it was done, things went well enough for the Braves to come home with the series tied.
Yeah, a lot to get into. And as we look at what went right, I mean, left was most definitely right. When we talk about Max Fried, dominated over 81 pitches, striking out 9, no walks, allowed 3 hits. I tied a career postseason high, by the way, with those 9 Ks. Grant, the holder of MLB's best ERA after the All-Star break, this was the best playoff start of his career. Outside of the 2-hit double he gave up to Willy Adames in the 6th, not a lot of trouble. And even then, he responded with an inning strikeout.
Yeah, he always seemed to have the answer through those first 5 innings especially. He was really on cruise control. The Brewers weren't squaring him up. And even in that 6th inning, he had to work out of a little bit of trouble, and his pitch count was still down around 80. So I know we'll discuss why Max Fried might not have been out there in the 7th inning in a moment. But as far as things he could control during those 6 innings, he controlled them extremely well. And as I talked about in our first episode, I believe, of Battery Power, and really as I've been talking about for what feels like 3 or 4 weeks now, when Max Fried is on the mound, the Braves' chances of winning go up exponentially. They have now won 11 of his last 12 starts, dating back to the beginning of August, none bigger than the one that they just took from Milwaukee to split this series and to bring it home with a chance to do some real damage at Truist Park.
Charlie Morton pitched really well in game 1, obviously keeping the Braves in the game. How much, though, do you think they needed just, that guy who was going to go out and set the tone again? I mean, the things could have potentially gotten away with from him. Brandon Woodruff did his part to keep the Brewers in this game. Once again, it kind of felt like we were playing this game of which offense is going to end up capitalizing on a mistake from the starting pitcher. It was Woodruff this time, the flip side of what the Braves saw in game 1, and Fried ultimately held up his end of the bargain.
Yeah, you needed the starting pitching. There was no way around that because, as we saw with the Braves bullpen over the final 3 innings, there's a lot of bend but don't break. And we're pretty familiar with that from the 2021 season, probably even dating back to last year at times and even all the way back into 2019. There's been some real adventures late in games. So if you can get that strong start from whoever is going to be taking the ball, whether it was Charlie Morton in game 1, Max Fried in game 2, Ian Anderson coming up in game 3, it's going to make the bullpen's job that much easier. They needed Fried to deliver, and he simply did not make any mistakes to give the Brewers that much of an opportunity to capitalize because they didn't have very many base runners against him. He was using his curveball and his slider to great effect. He was throwing his breaking ball 50% of the time and backing it up with a fastball he was locating extremely well at 94, 95 miles an hour throughout the duration of that start. So again, while it may not have been a high-stress outing in terms of the overall pitch count, Max Fried had to feel like ice water was pumping through his veins. I'm sure he very much is going to feel like he just went through 12 or 15 rounds, depending on what era of boxing you're used to.
Well, Austin Riley, as we continue on what went right, I mean, you think about game 1, and we talked about this after that 9th inning single against Josh Hader felt like a key moment. He follows that up by hammering a changeup 428 feet, 105.7 miles an hour off the bat off Brandon Woodruff. That was an insurance run. And then Riley, finds his groove again. He gets an infield hit in the 8th inning that was backed up by replay. All very, very good signs when you think about a guy who, obviously was a big factor for this team, put together an MVP type season for them, was extremely hot after the All-Star break. This is exactly what you needed to see from Austin Riley after coming through with that hit against Hader in game 1.
Yeah, this is the Austin Riley we saw over the really beginning at the start of May, or maybe even the last week of April, where it just got incrementally better. His strike zone awareness, his plate discipline, you could tell that he had worked hard and continued to work hard throughout the season. And then once it got to the All-Star break and around the trade deadline, not only were the Braves bringing in some new talent, but Austin Riley was taking it to a whole different level. He's found his way on base, 4 times here through the first couple of games. The home run on the changeup I love, because Austin Riley's not some one-trick pony anymore. You're not going to just eat him up with fastballs, and if he doesn't hit it out, you're going to be able to just send him back to the dugout on 3 pitches on a bunch of tough breaking balls and off-speed stuff out of the zone. He's a completely different hitter than he was when he came up in 2019. He's been demonstrating that. The numbers bear it out, and the Braves are getting a good performance from him. And hey, across the diamond, it was great to see Freddie Freeman getting the Braves on the board with their first run of the series. And as it turned out, the only one that they need on this day. But man, it felt good to have 3 of those by the time you got to the 9th inning.
Yeah, I want to get into manufacturing runs here in a second, but I think you got on something that I love here with Austin Riley. If you think back to 2019, it was obviously he was devouring fastballs and the slider was an issue for him. Then you look at the second season, and all of a sudden he's improving against sliders, but his numbers against the fastball are worse than they were the previous season. This year, he was able to put it all together, and we saw the play discipline rise along with that as well. I think that's been, to me, the most fascinating thing about sort of the development of Austin Riley is how he's gone from this guy who was, hunting fastballs to adjusting and trying to learn on the fly, and now we're seeing this version of him that can do this kind of damage in back-to-back games against the best closer in baseball.
Yep.
And then you follow that up with one of the guys who's, been one of the top 10 starters in 2021.
Now, look, I know Austin Riley loves hunting, but I would like to see him bagging all kinds of different game rather than just being fastball hunting and early in the count trying to pick on a pitch over the plate. He's really been able to build on the work each and every year. And we've talked so much about this over the past few years, you and I, when we were really talking about Braves prospects in the big league club. It wasn't that great. How do you grow these guys? How do you groom them? How do you develop them? And then realizing every single guy, for the most part, is going to have a different trek, not only to the big leagues, but to finding sustainable success at the big league level as well. But Austin Riley, the hard work has paid off. He has seen Albert Pujols, Chipper Jones. He's had Kevin Seitzer working with him, obviously, for a number of years. Coaches all through the minor leagues that have helped him out. And so it kind of took a village to get things on track. But for Riley, it was being a good student and being there and being willing to put in the hard work, investing in himself to make himself the best hitter that he can possibly be. And at 24 years old, I'm not saying he's done yet, but man, he really put it all together in a season where the Braves were in dire need of some consistency wherever you could find it. Austin Riley established himself as a cornerstone player, and it's good to see these results carrying over thus far in the postseason.
Yeah, we're spending a lot of time on obviously that majestic home run that Riley hit in his play so far, but you mentioned it. I mean, it really ended up being an insurance run that the Braves didn't really need. I mean, I think go back to them being 0 for 6 with runners in scoring position in their first opportunities there when you include game 1. They break through. We talk about manufacturing runs. That RBI single from Freddie Freeman in the third. Ozzie always follows with what looked like a home run, but settled for a double and a 2-0 lead. This was I felt like what this offense needed. We've seen them rely on the home run so much, but it was nice to see them just be able to string some stuff together and finally have that be the way that they really broke through against this Brewers pitching staff.
Yeah, the home runs are nice. You'll take all of them you can get every single night. And I think if you went through the stats and looked across, and I know they showed some during the broadcast of, teams that get a larger percentage of their runs with homers, I wasn't surprised to see the Braves there in the top 4 or 5 teams. Not surprised at all. I was a little bit surprised by the San Francisco Giants because I have not seen them play as much. I knew they had some guys having good years, but I didn't realize they were that reliant on the home run. But just kind of putting all of that aside, what you wanted to see from the Braves were quality at-bats that ended with guys getting on base. And while I'll take, again, all of the home runs that they want to hit every single night, there were some, I think, encouraging plate appearances and being able to string those together timely enough, even if they weren't hanging a couple of crooked numbers up before the game was done, they were able to get the 3 runs they needed and get out of Milwaukee with this split. So hopefully as they come home, get a little bit more comfortable back at Truist Park, get out in front of Braves fans, this will be the kind of momentum that they need to have the offense break out a little bit behind Ian Anderson.
You said the M word there, and I think that's what that was all about, was momentum. Turning to what went wrong for the Braves, there wasn't a lot. I mean, you could criticize some aggressive green lights from Ron Washington at third, but Freddie Freeman obviously in before the throw to get to that early lead.
Right.
4 strikeouts from catcher Travis d'Arnaud I thought was a little unsightly. We didn't get to see the true splendor of postseason base stealing specialist Terrence Gore. He comes in for Jock Peterson, and that kind of goes awry as Jorge Soler flies out. We and I talked about this after game 1. It felt like Brian Snitker took Charlie Morton out too late in game 1. He hit pinch hits for Jock Peterson after just 81, seemingly zero stress pitches. I mean, the guy was absolutely dominant, but some dicey moments. But ultimately, things worked out because of Tyler Matzik and Will Smith.
Yeah, I mean, you had to lean on this bullpen. As I've said, bend but don't break might be their mantra. You might want to put that on a T-shirt. If the Braves win it all, they ought to get those guys a T-shirt, and it ought to say World Champs on it because they've contributed to this as much as anybody else, and they're going to be depended on all the way down the stretch. I understood with Charlie Morton, especially in a scoreless game, the temptation of sticking with him, but I also understood the flip side of that coin was, has he given you enough? I kind of felt like he had. Wish the Braves could have broken through. They pinch hit for Morton, and he never goes through, giving up that 2-run homer, but sometimes baseball is a cruel sport. On the next day, because, again, baseball apparently has a sense of humor, you have Max Fried with a chance to go out there for his 7th inning, 3rd trip through the lineup. He'd already begun, and you go ahead and you go to the bullpen, and you allow for those guys to come in and get the outs that you paid them to get. Luke Jackson was able to wriggle out of some trouble. Tyler Matzik certainly helped him out. And then Will Smith was able to shut the door, even if it became an adventure pretty much in all 3 of those innings. Even if you felt like you lost minutes or perhaps hours, maybe even days off of your life, just with the stress level that was involved with it, a win is a win. These guys got it done. I'm interested to see what the leash will be for Ian Anderson. But of course, when we saw what he did in the postseason last year, by and large, the moment was not too big for him. So hopefully he'll be able to follow in the shoes of Morton and Fried, give the Braves, I know it's not a popular stat, but a quality start, get those 6 innings in the books, keep the Brewers offense at bay, and let the Braves bats go to work. I really feel like that's all you can ask of the starting pitchers. The bullpen will get a very key day off because I think we're going to see a lot of Luke Jackson, Tyler Matzik, and Will Smith before we see anybody else out of that bullpen.
Well, I mean, think about it. We saw Tyler Matzik come in. Daniel Vogelbach, gets the strikeout there. Obviously, he gets 2 guys on the next inning, comes through with a pair of strikeouts, a fly out to get out of that. We've seen this, this drama from Will Smith. He's only seen, the minimum of 10 of his last 29 regular season appearances, but he obviously gets through that. So it's got me thinking, we talk about Charlie Morton in the postseason resume. Is that in your mind why he's allowed to stay out there and why Max Fried, maybe as much as Brian Snitker trusts him, doesn't have that resume and that postseason pedigree that you're maybe a little bit quicker on the pull with him?
No, I don't necessarily think so. I think it was just an overall maybe being a little bit gun shy because sticking with your starter the day before simply didn't work. I think it was more coincidental than anecdotal, if that makes sense, as I pull out all my $2 words here. But I do feel like Max Fried has certainly earned the opportunity to throw a 7th inning. And if they were in a place where they were up 1-0 I believe he would have been out there for the 7th inning with that 3-run lead. It's just a lot of different things that go into it. It's a tough seat to be on. It's one that comes with a lot of criticism. Brian Snitker's got some pretty thick skin, and that's just part of the job as a big league manager. But I do think that Fried, going forward, won't always be limited like this. This, I think, was just an amalgamation of things, to use another one, that led to the bullpen getting the call as early as it did, to the surprise of some, including myself.
Well, win and to pull your starter backfired on the Braves in game 1, did not in game 2. They obviously end up getting the victory there to pull things even. As we flip to what's next, it's Ian Anderson on the mound as things return to SunTrust Park for game 3 on Monday. We have not seen an announcement yet on the Brewers starter. They're not actually expected to announce until tomorrow. They're obviously going to be back in the friendly confines of Truist Park. Definitely want to get into Ian Anderson. Certainly he was historically dominant last postseason. You and I talked about this before we came on. Freddie Peralta seems the obvious choice for the Brewers to roll out there as the starter in game 3. In your mind, is there any other option for this team at this point?
Yeah, I think they could look at Eric Lauer and perhaps go that route. But if I'm Craig Counsell right now, I'm going to go with my best guys and make sure they have the opportunity to give them a series lead. I think this is a series in 5 games. This kind of series, I should say, is more about win the day and figure out tomorrow as you go. In a 7-game series, I feel like you've got a little more wiggle room, but you don't have a lot when it's, win 3 out of 5 to advance in this division series. So whether you love that format or don't, for me, it puts a little bit more emphasis on the day. So if I'm the Brewers, I'm looking at Freddie Peralta, but there are reasons that they could throw Eric Lauer that would make complete sense. I would just be the Braves preparing for Peralta, and they're going to know who they're going to get well before the first pitch. So whatever the case is, the Braves know that their job is to go out and score runs. And Ian Anderson, of course, as we saw in the postseason last year, undefeated in 4 starts, sub-1 ERA, piling up strikeouts, as I talked about a couple episodes ago, doing a great Steve Avery impression. I'd love to see that continue, because that Steve Avery 1991 and into 1992 postseason was the stuff of legend, and he was doing it in his very early 20s. So let's see if Ian Anderson can follow suit and have another great postseason run in him as the Braves try to take a lead in this series.
Freddie Peralta warming up in game 1, maybe thinking maybe Craig Counsell was going to, because of Devin Williams not being in that bullpen, they were going to kind of use him as that ultimate weapon that you'd be able to use, in a multitude of ways. But I think you're right. It just makes too much sense to have him out there. You roll out your best 3 starters and see how things factor into the series after that. Anderson, by the way, 4.39 ERA in 5 September/October starts. Was obviously fantastic in his 1 start against the Brewers, 1 run on 2 hits over 6 innings back in May. I mentioned, though, we've yet to see that level of dominance from Ian Anderson that we saw last postseason. What gives you some confidence that we could, maybe not to that degree, but that we see an Ian Anderson that's good enough to get the Braves where they need to be on Monday?
There were a couple of late season starts in particular, like late September, one against the Diamondbacks in particular, where I felt like he was really starting to find his way. And look, I know it's the Diamondbacks. That's not exactly the 27 Yankees. In fact, you might could resuscitate the 27 Yankees and get more offense out of them, but you play the hand that's dealt. I felt like that was a good opportunity for Ian Anderson to stretch himself out through 7 innings, pile up some strikeouts, go pitch his kind of game. And he has pitched well at Truist Park this year. So those are a couple of things that make me feel good about this particular matchup. Not that he couldn't handle the pressure on the road, but that's what you signed Charlie Morton. That's what you have Max Fried for at this point. Now come home, let Ian Anderson get comfortable, hopefully give you those innings, and let the Braves bats break out in a big way and try to take a lead in this series. And there's still an opportunity that this thing doesn't go back to Milwaukee. So kind of circling all the way back to Craig Counsell and the decision of who you throw, who you don't throw, I would just go with the best I got as soon as I got, make sure I get the chance to get them in there. We've seen postseason series where you overthink the starting rotation just a little bit, and then you spend a lot of time in hindsight wishing that maybe you hadn't, or that you'd done the exact opposite thing. So we'll see what the Brewers decide to do, but the onus is on the Braves to come home and play their brand of baseball in their ballpark.
On the topic of the Braves offense, I firmly expect Adam Duvall to have a moment or two hitless in this series so far. Obviously, a near 900 OPS at Truist Park, hit 11 of his 38 home runs there. An 847 OPS, by the way, for him at home at that ballpark since 2018, the 5th best of any player in that park with at least 200 plate appearances. So I feel like Adam Duvall's kind of due a breakout, probably going to deliver that in game 3.
Yeah, let's hope so. I mean, that's the reason why I made the Duvall field graphic that I like to post up there. I've also made a couple of other Adam Duvall graphics, including one that has proclaimed him all elite. We haven't seen a lot out of him in this postseason. It's been quiet. I know there have been some murmurs about, hey, maybe it's time to give Jock Peterson a start, and maybe it is. We'll see what kind of lineup they run out there in game 3. But either way, I think for the Braves to make a run through October, Adam Duvall is going to have some big moments. He can do it with the glove. You'd love to see some with the bats, and he does seem to ratchet it up another level when there's runners on base. He's had a couple chances here early. It's a small sample size. I'm sure he can look at last year's postseason and want a little bit of redemption for that, not only for the way it ended, but the fact he didn't get to make a big impact last October. So the Braves are better with Adam Duvall. What role he plays, what role all of these outfielders play will be interesting to monitor going forward, and we'll see who's in the starting lineup in game 3.
However it plays out, make sure you come along with the ride with Battery Power. We'll be back after Monday's game 3. So if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the Talking Chop YouTube channel. Turn on those notifications so you get that buzz there for all of our latest episodes. For Graham McAuley, I'm Cory McCartney. We've got a series on our hands, people, and we'll be back for plenty more here on Battery Power. Until next time, Braves Country.